Hello guys, Crypto Sunday, and we've had a slightly volatile week. Last week was sort of going into the big sell-off on Friday, and sort of the weekend was obviously the fallout of that. We sort of recovered a little bit this week and then gone down again. So I'm down 6,000, about 1.8%. Obviously not a lot in the crypto world, but yeah, people sort of extremely unhappy on Twitter and sort of various places. Sort of seeing the crypto fear and greed index really down low, sort of every day moving into fear and extreme fear at times, back to fear again. But yeah, it's rough out there. Obviously, sort of people haven't been through some of the previous cycles that we've had. 2017 was sort of far worse than this, and yeah, sort of the bear market in 2014 was absolutely crushing. But there you go. Looking at the CoinShares report, we had, so this is for well, the week including the big sell-off. This includes that sort of rather poor Friday, but we still got 3.17 billion in inflows. So, a reasonable week. If you sort of look at, this line, it's a lot of the strong weeks. There's only sort of a few weeks that are above that line, so pretty good. This is pretty much all Bitcoin and Ethereum, where we had been getting the other coins pushing some large numbers. 2.67 billion into Bitcoin, 338 into Ethereum. Another negative on the multi-asset funds. That's sort of quite unusual. 93 million into Solana. I suppose we'll still see that as very strong. And XRP 61 million, although negative for the month. A little bit into Sui, Litecoin, Cardano still. 3.2 million into Chainlink isn't bad. Only sort of 135 in there in total, so that's a good total for the week. And 33 million into other coins. There's 887 million in sort of total products on other coins, and yeah, 33 million into that. That's pretty strong. Sort of 3-4% into those. You sort of see, presumably XRP and Solana is coming from Germany and Switzerland still, and yeah, sort of single-digit numbers elsewhere. 22 million out of Sweden, and sort of 10 million out of Brazil and Hong Kong. Brazil sort of not the buyers that they once were, even in sort of small size, and 3 billion into the US. So looking at this week, we're going to have a red CoinShares report tomorrow from the looks of it. It's pretty much negative all week. Monday, you had 326 million outflow, even though a small inflow into BlackRock. But it was Bitwise and Fidelity sort of leading the way on the outflows there, and Grayscale sort of continuing to bleed its high fee assets under management, which is sort of no surprise. We were in the really bullish times, we were seeing inflows even into the old Grayscale, but now it's just solid. Nobody wants to be paying 1.5% fee on a fairly underperforming fund. So yeah, that's coming out quite heavy at the moment. And then Tuesday we did see, thanks to Fidelity, bit of a surprise, a sort of rebound on Tuesday, a slight positive day, 102 million, but then yeah, 100 million, 530 million, and 366 in outflows. Outflows out of BlackRock for 4 days in a row as well. So that's a little bit of a surprise. I suppose they have to take some profit maybe eventually. Presumably most of those investors are significantly up, the sort of longer term ones that aren't hedge funds and things. And I noticed the, as I call them, the emotional investors. ARK Invest 275 million in outflows, which they've only had 2 billion in total inflows. So yeah, that's a very large percentage of that. I presume that's not that won't be assets under management. It's not selling over 10% of the fund, I don't think, because the fund obviously will have gone up in value with Bitcoin going up in value if it launched, a year and a half ago, over a year and a half ago. But that's still a very large outflow, and that is ARK Invest all over. So somewhat similar in Ethereum. We had two inflow days, Tuesday and Wednesday, 236 and 170. Quite a bit, basically all of that going into BlackRock. A little bit going into the old Ethereum grayscale at 2.5% fee, but quite a lot coming out of that the rest of the week. Yeah, Monday was 428 million outflow with 300 odd coming from BlackRock. So a little bit of a surprise. They had some inflows even on Thursday, and then Friday outflow across the board, 232 million out. So yeah, Monday and Friday sort of the big hitter days. But there you go. And the little Rex Osprey Solana ETF finally seeing some outflows. 12.3 million on Tuesday and 2.9 on Thursday. But it looks like, that'll still be a net gain for the week. 15 million inflow on Wednesday and 11 on Friday, with 3 million on Monday. So it's still net up for the week, which is pretty strong, you have to say. It's a new, much newer ETF than all the rest. So maybe there is just pent up demand still wanting to get into Solana. We sort of await whether the big boys will get theirs. SEC sort of seem to be dragging their heels on some of these a little bit, even though sort of your Eric Balchunas and James Seyfarts are saying that they are basically working quicker than they ever have in the past, and we shouldn't sort of expect like crypto speed from the SEC. Basically, they're positive and constructive towards these things, but they still take their time. So the treasury companies, which we will come to in a second, are pretty much dead at the moment as far as buying, and there's sort of grave concerns about whether they might start selling at some point, sort of being not in danger, but some of them might start wanting to do buybacks. If they are trading at a discount, you sort of sell the Bitcoin and buy back your stock, and in theory the stock price should rise. I would have thought you might get a little bit of unhappiness at selling the Bitcoin, even though it would be potentially good for the share price. It's just doesn't look good for a treasury company to be selling the entire reason for the company existing. So you could get people selling anyway. But yeah, this was basically it for the week. It looks like 220 Bitcoin from Strategy. He sort of leaks a message on the Sunday, and everyone sort of gets excited, and then it's like, yeah, we bought 220. We hold 640,000, so it's not exactly moving the needle at all. And their average has pushed up to 74,000 exactly. The little UK one, Smarter Web Company, did buy 100, so that's quite a reasonable buy compared to their total. And the Bitcoin yield, strategy note like 25.9% Bitcoin yield or Bitcoin per share increase, which is always a nonsense metric. Smarter Web Companies is 57,000. So how lovely. And the AI pictures of Michael Saylor are, I would say, getting even more desperate. I saw one up the top here. Well, a sort of fighter pilot, Top Gun type picture, but where were we? Yeah, that one's got to be the worst. So speaking of treasury companies, I thought this seemed a little bit strange. Ripple looking to buy $1 billion worth of XRP for a new treasury. Not sure whether it said whether this, or yeah, they are looking to launch a fundraising effort, so potentially borrowing to buy back their own token, despite them sort of leaking XRP into the market sort of pretty much every month. I believe, yeah, they hold 37 billion in escrow, and 1 billion of the 1 billion XRP of this gets released from escrow every month. They sort of stress that they don't have to sell that, and that's why a lot of it. They've now got 4.5 billion tokens sort of in their stash that have been unlocked and they haven't sold. Sort of back in the day, they were selling everything that that came out of the escrow, and yeah, so they're now sitting on 4.5 billion tokens, which sort of at whatever they're at, $2.50 now or something. It's over $10 billion. So I guess buying 1 billion tokens isn't going to have a colossal effect. It's not pushing it up to the $787 that people used to sort of dream about, but I just thought it was a little bit strange, sort of them basically borrowing to buy back their own token. I would sort of rather they were trying to push forward on use cases for the token. It just seems a little bit desperate to me. And yes, Cointelegraph noting Bitcoin treasuries sort of sentiment has got really, really bad, and people are selling even the big ones down to a discount. It's sort of been noted that Metaplanet, once at a 8 billion market cap for $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, so sort of 8x premium, have been selling stock to buy Bitcoin, which you could say is better than the sort of strategy taking on convertible debt model. There's no sort of, well, from what I can see, there isn't that much debt on Metaplanet, if any. They have sort of taken the hit, basically. Shareholders take the hit for gaining this Bitcoin, and now if Bitcoin does well, Metaplanet could potentially come out better than strategy out of this, because they've sort of taken the upfront hit by selling the shares. But Metaplanet are now at a discount, 3.1 billion market cap, backed by 3.3 billion in Bitcoin. So the Japanese sort of, maybe they've found other ways to buy crypto, or maybe they just don't want to, but they're not sort of piling into Metaplanet as a proxy at the moment. Yeah, saw this enormous rocket up sort of earlier in the year as they were buying an awful lot, and people were sort of getting excited what they could potentially do with it going forward, which there do now seem to be concerns and sort of doubts as to whether these companies can actually do anything with it. If there's a sort of secure way to be lending it out and getting money on that, or whether you would just end up losing some of it and it not being worth it. But yeah, what do you do with it basically? It's not like a sort of Solana treasury or Ethereum treasury where you stake it and you'd get an income. Getting an income off Bitcoin is possibly a little bit more difficult, and still no companies really have been doing that. Even strategies their strategies preferred stocks don't count. That's just sort of a way to issue more shares basically and buy more Bitcoin without diluting the initial stock. But yeah, 343% up on Metaplanet and 77% down, and it's basically round trip. It's done a mountain. But we are pushing more into real world assets. Robinhood have tokenized nearly 500 US stocks and ETFs. ETFs are quite interesting. Over $8.5 million, so it's not exactly a huge amount of money, but the idea is there. The latest batch includes Galaxy token, Webull, Synopsys. So these are already publicly listed companies that you can buy, but sort of putting them on chain is potentially an interesting move if you can sort of trade these at the weekend. Still haven't sort of seen a concrete way that this can be done and match the price action sort of compared with the actual stock market. Obviously closes on Friday and opens on Monday. If news comes out Saturday afternoon, for example, and you buy this token Saturday afternoon, the actual stock Monday morning is going to rocket up. And where has that sort of money come from to acquire the actual shares of Galaxy, say, Monday morning when it has gone up? Because people are just trading the token around. There's no actual money going to Robinhood. Maybe it's been confirmed in the details, but I certainly haven't seen it. And they are just sort of kind of saying there's no underlying link to the actual token. It's just derivatives. But yeah, seems a little bit odd to me. The sort of, I would say, better idea. I think these are from Galaxy and possibly Webull. These are actual stock of the company. They're not sort of derivatives that some of the other companies were doing. But if you have sort of partially blockchain stock and partially stock exchange stock, then that's just an awkward sort of mix, really. You would want everything to be sort of converted onto the blockchain, and yeah, that's how it's traded, so that you don't get this Friday night, Monday morning sort of fiasco. And then in a similar vein, we now have pre-stocks. So this is sort of very much a derivative, not tied to the price of the underlying stock, because there is no stock. These are private companies. There is no sort of publicly traded stock. There are shares that obviously get issued. Employees of these companies, get issued stock, and they are sort of, there's a few very low liquidity sort of minor ways that they're allowed to sort of sell their stock. But of course, so that kind of that together with funding rounds of sort of, where the company is valued at on those funding rounds gives you a price, maybe not a very liquid price, but you now have derivatives sort of based on that and trading. Again, they're sort of saying that they're only derivatives. You may not, if the company IPOs, you may not actually get stock in the company, and it's just a a derivative tracking the price. But yeah, they're interesting. Obviously, people want to be getting into XAI and SpaceX and people like that. OpenAI, sort of one of the biggest probably the biggest private company in the world, if not Tether. There is potential that Tether are even bigger than OpenAI, of course. I noticed they don't have Tether here. They have said that these 5 are basically their sort of focus. They've said the following tokens have been fully refunded in USDC to holder wallets and are no longer tradable. These tokens were deprecated to focus attention, liquidity, and resources towards the top 5 names. Not quite sure deprecated is the right word, but there you go. So you had Discord, Epic Games, Kraken, some other Perplexity, various companies here that were sort of, I guess, basically not traded enough, or not enough interest, not the company's focus. But yeah, seems interesting. So you can sort of bet on the price of these companies, essentially. I would say most of these are quite frothy valuations, really. People are very excited about SpaceX, but it's 370 billion already. Similarly with OpenAI, sort of almost no revenue actually going through the door at the moment. A lot of promises of future revenue, but 452 billion price at the moment is very lofty. Again, Anthropic 210 billion. Maybe it becomes huge, but yeah, paying already 210 billion for the stock. XAI 135. I mean, Anduril, this sort of AI defense autonomous company, at sort of 41 billion. I've not seen their sort of revenues, whether it's basically, betting on the future or whether they're doing something real, but maybe 41 billion is a little bit more down to earth. But yeah, interesting. And the US Bitcoin reserve, it looks like could be growing again, but not because of their buying, basically. It's another very, very large seizure. I think this is being, if they get all 15 billion of this, they're saying this could be the biggest seizure of anything, crypto or non-crypto, in the world, or in history. So interesting. Department of Justice seized $15 billion worth of Bitcoin held by a Chinese man in Cambodia, overseeing a pig butchering fraud operation, which I hadn't heard the term. I kind of thought it was something to do with pigs, very naively. But no, it's I guess you'd call it a romance scam. People sort of, messaging, I guess, catfishing, pretending to be I would have thought an attractive woman going after a man. I can't imagine too many of them are the other way around. And yeah, you sort of, that is the idea. You're, being very friendly to the guy, fattening him up for slaughter, and then you find some way of asking for money. He gives you the money and you leave forever. And you can see sort of 1,250 mobile phones on racks and racks with sort of messaging different guys, I suppose. They controlled 76,000 accounts, so multiple accounts per phone. Just really an industrial operation of, catfishing, pig butchering, whatever they're calling it. Somebody has to go around and manage all of these conversations with various guys, sort of pretending to be interested in them. They were saying it was forced labour compounds across Cambodia, so these guys were forced to be doing this, and it's just kind of disgusting, really. But yeah, I suppose this sort of thing does go on, and they amassed $15 billion in Bitcoin. So very, very surprising. The UK had their $5 billion one recently, and again talks about whether this Bitcoin or the sale of it should go back to the sort of victims, basically. Again, the same argument of police sort of catch somebody stealing your car, they get the car. Do they then sell your car and keep the money, or do you get your car back? I would say there is an argument there. So looking at the Bitcoin miners, we've seen quite a significant up and down in the last week on the hash rate. I'm sort of largely out of the miners in terms of sort of herein, CleanSpark and Riot platforms. Still got quite a lot of Hive left that has taken quite a hit this week. But yeah, so I'm still monitoring the hash rate and sort of various minor metrics. And yeah, Friday we saw an enormous spike up to 1.4 zettahash, which I believe is it's not quite a new high. We hit that sort of mid-September, but it's quite high. It did come back down to just under 1 zettahash and is now 1.23, so a pretty strong move still. And yeah, we had the Bitcoin difficulty drop down sort of for the last week or so. Expected to be a larger drop than this. It was sort of below 140 at one point on the sort of expected drop, and has been trickling up as hash rate increased again, and we got a drop to 146.72. So compared to sort of the last few months, even sort of the previous adjustment, it was 142. So now 146. And yeah, before then it was 136 and 130, which I've noted before. So beginning of September, we were at 130, and yeah, we're now at 146 for the next week and a half, it's looking like. And obviously with these spikes up to 1.4 zettahash, a lot of blocks got mined, and we're at 9.12 minutes per block, which is too short. So again, these don't happen exactly as as expected, but the next adjustment on estimated October the 29th is expected to add nearly 10% to the total, taking us up to nearly 161, which is off the chart here. So yeah, still not particularly comfortable with the Bitcoin miners, and we'll be looking to sell on sort of significant strength if we get it, especially on the options. I've only got what, 3 months left now on the options, so yeah, can't exactly sort of sit back and wait on these for a long while, and I don't want to roll them into, you know, January 27 options, because yeah, I'm not that confident on the mining scene, as I've sort of made relatively clear. And no surprise, I guess, the global liquidity chart looks awful. We sort of had this, you know, great big spike up to 126, sort of made a new slightly higher high, and have now come crashing down all the way to 105. So it did get down to 103, and as I say, various different exchanges. I think some were at 101, sort of wicking down before, and now sitting at sort of 106. Global liquidity chart is sort of up in the 170s implied price. So yeah, we're getting this divergence carrying on, and a lot of people are sort of saying the cycle is over. It topped out at 126. I think those same people were saying it topped out back at 123 and sort of at 122. But you have to say, we're not exactly sort of rocketing up to new highs every time we make a new high. It's sort of $1,000, $2,000. So yeah, it's looking kind of weak, especially with gold just going into orbit at the moment. If we're going to sort of catch up to this global liquidity, I would say it needs to sort of happen pretty soon, because we do have a, you know, a fairly rough, you know, choppy period coming up in the liquidity. So yeah, we'll see. It's difficult to sort of use this as too much of an indicator at the moment. So looking at coins for the week, quite surprisingly, a lot of this fall has come from Bitcoin, down 4.9% for the week. Solana is in fact up, which doesn't particularly help me, since I think I've lost most of my Solana. I will sort of write this down eventually and sort of admit that I don't own it. Thankfully, the sort of stock side has largely picked up for that, and I should be able to sort of retire relatively comfortably, even with this Solana going to zero. But there you go, it was a shame. Ethereum is also up for the week, 0.5%, so that's pretty strong. Chainlink down 3.8%, still a little bit better than Bitcoin. And then some of the Solana ecosystem tokens, strangely enough, with Solana being up, they've had a very poor week. Metaplex down 14.7%, Helium down 15%. Gito actually is up 1.5% for the week, and then Radium down 6.57%, and Honey 5.4%. So yeah, Honey down to 360 quid. It's not a happy camper at the moment. But there you go. Bit of a rough week for crypto. Have to see if things pick up. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and like and subscribe. See you soon.